Ever notice how the most fascinating stories are never really about what happened, but why it happened? The cultural undercurrents, the power moves, the moments that shift everything? That's where Claude, an AI thinking partner, comes in. For minds that see a headline and ask, what does this really mean? And who's actually behind this? Claude helps you dig deeper into the questions that won't let you go, connecting dots others might miss. Try Claude for free at claude.ai/morning meeting. Happy Saturday. It's October 11th, 2025, and you are listening to Morning Meeting. I'm Ashley Baker in London.
And I'm Michael Haney in New York City.
Well, we have a little bit of good, happy news for you this week. A doctor named Fred Ramsdell was camping in Montana earlier this week when his wife started shouting. They had just regained service after going on an on-the-grid hiking vacation. And it turns out he had quite a few missed calls, including one that came in at 2 a.m. from the Nobel Committee that he and two others had been awarded the 2025 Nobel Prize for their research on the immune system. As always, Aramel and Morning Meeting are the antidote to all the bad things happening in the world. It's only good times here.
Yeah, we've got a great issue for you today and a great show. First, you all know Errol Morris, the esteemed documentary filmmaker. And this week, he's going to join us to discuss how he came to change his views on one of the most controversial subjects of one of his most searing films. Then, Elena Clavarino is going to join us from Italy with her report on one of the country's most unusual regions, a constellation of villages nestled near the tip of Italy's boot that still speaks a Greek dialect dating back more than 3,000 years. It's a fascinating story. And finally, Jilly Cooper, the British author who sold bazillions of books with her tales set among the horsey set of high society, died recently. And our man in London, Harry Mount, is going to join us with a look at her life and career. So Ashley, where would you like to begin today?
Well, Michael, the news is the news, and we have to start with the biggest story that's rocking my world this week, which is the death of Jilly Cooper. What a way to go. 88 years old, tripped and fell down the stairs. A cinematic ending to a very cinematic life. Harry Mount, who's the editor of The Oldie, joins us to tell us all about his dear friend and what made her such a unique voice, not only in literature, but also in London society. Welcome, Harry.
Hi, how are you?
Harry, first of all, we're very sorry for your loss. We know that you and Jilly Cooper were friends. This is something that everyone is talking about in the UK this week. How did you handle the news?
Well, it was very shocking. I just read the publicity announcement from her publishers. And although she was 88, a great age, she'd written, I think, her last article for The Oldie, which I edit, only a week ago. And it was a tiny little thing about her favorite charity. We asked lots of people. And even in that little thing she wrote, she was funny. She loved her greyhounds, so her charity was called Greyhounds in Need. She was saying how lovely her greyhounds were and that greyhounds are sophaholics, which is the great Jilly word. So even doing could have been a dull piece was lifted.
I mean, Harry, around the world, she's known for her novels, which are beloved, but she was also a journalist for many years. Not only, her work with the Times, where she was a columnist, but even long before that. Give us the Jilly Cooper story.
So she came from an upper middle class background, wasn't expected to work, but she was a natural journalist. At the age of 20, she got a job on a very small local paper just outside London called the Middlesex Independent. And that was covering, weddings, dog shows, church services. But I think that's a great training, not just as a journalist, but as a writer. In her novels, a brilliant eye for detail and character. About 10 years later, in her late 30s, she got a job on the Sunday Times as a columnist. She just happened to sit next door to the editor of the Sunday Times magazine. And she's so funny to speak to, as she would have been to him. And she told him what a terrible wife she was. She'd been washing her husband's rugby kit, mixed up the washing with her pink knickers. And so he was the only one in a pink jockstrap at the rugby game the next week. And she had an eye for funny detail, sexual detail as well. But it was that thing of detail, which she was so good at, and very, very choice words, as well as words she invented herself.
And how did she turn into a novelist?
So she had written a book about how to be married in the early 60s. And then she started on the back of her success as a very, very well-known Sunday Times columnist. She started writing her novels, individual ones to begin with, and then the Rutshire Chronicles, based very closely on her own home county of Gloucestershire. And they were a huge, huge success. And then that was redoubled, so wonderful in the last year before she died, of being shown on TV over here and in the States too.
And how did she feel about that sort of global fame at 88?
Well, she loved it. When I interviewed her for her last book called Tackle about soccer, she was forbidden from talking to me about the Rivals deal because they were just about to film it. But as soon as her fantastic PA, Amanda Butler, went out the room, she whispered, said, "It's wonderful. They're paying me hundreds of thousands of pounds." So she absolutely loved the success. But I think underneath it all, she didn't have a high opinion of herself. It was quite actually hard to interview her because when you asked her questions, she would ask you questions back. And if you asked her about something sad in her life, that her late husband, Leo Cooper, had a long affair, and it's one of those questions you would have asked them, well, you'd have to say, "I'm so sorry to ask this." She didn't mind being asked at all about the affair. And she said, "It was wonderful. I went down to 7.5 stone. It's a great diet, your husband having an affair." So she turns even the toughest things in life into an amusing story.
It reminds me of that old Nora Ephron maxim, everything is copy.
Well, exactly. And Nora Ephron came from the same sort of category of being able to be very, very funny about everything and cute observation of people's behavior and brilliant ear for what they say.
Harry, one of the things that struck me, I mean, here in the U.S., I think, she's not as well known clearly as in the U.K. And yet, to show how much she was revered across British society, even Queen Camilla put out a statement, saying how much she enjoyed Gilly's work. And I wanted to ask you that level of her work, because it's not just about the horsey set and all that, but I think it gets into British sort of class and that whole thing. Can you dissect that a little bit for us too, for those of us in the U.S. who might not be so familiar with the nuances of it?
Yeah, she's brilliant on class. She herself came from an upper middle class background, and then she born in London and lived first sort of 30 or 40 years of her life in London. Then she moved to Gloucestershire when she was around 40 and really taking off in a charming, lovely 14th century house right in the middle of a valley where it seemed everybody was sleeping with everybody else. But she moved very much among an upper middle class set. So she was very good friends with Camilla Parker Bowles before she became the Queen, and her ex-husband, Andrew Parker Bowles. But she moved among all classes, which in a way you can do quite easily in that kind of horsey set. She loved racing and riding, and she was extremely friendly to everyone. So she had an eye for all sorts of classes, and all sorts of classes liked her. So among the tributes, as you say, there was a very good one by the Queen hoping she's surrounded by very good looking men and wonderful dogs in heaven. But she also got lots of tributes across all backgrounds, including from a very successful journalist here, Caitlin Moran in the Times, who grew up in the Midlands in a working class background. And she said her books released her as a child in the 80s to understand particularly about sex. And as we know, sex crosses all class barriers. So she did largely write about the upper middle classes and some of the people who worked for them, but she was appreciated across all classes. And I think that's because she was such an incredibly good writer. She was actually capturing human behavior as well as upper class human behavior.
Harry, you were fortunate to sit next to her at many dinner parties. What was she like?
Well, she was very, very funny. And you see photos of her, which there are a lot in the press at the moment. The person she's with is almost always laughing. And at the beginning of the year, I was at a dinner party in Gloucestershire, in fact. Rivals had just come out. And I said to her, and I was sitting next to her and another man, I said to her how good the sex scenes were. And in it was direct, but not quite related to what we were saying. She just suddenly said, "Does size really matter? Don't women only orgasm through the clitoris?" And I burst out laughing. It was also a sort of questioner, pleaded ignorance as to the answer. And the friend on the other side also said in a typically English way, "I'm not sure I'm sufficiently qualified." Now, it wasn't aimed to shock. She knew us both well. She knew it was funny, and it was an accelerant to interesting and amusing conversation. So I'm not suggesting we all use it as an opening line in conversation to strangers, but if you know somebody, you know they won't be shocked. It immediately kind of showed we were all on the same page, as it were, and we could say anything you want. And she did that the whole time. When you were talking to her, you could tell she was looking at one remove at the conversation and how to make it funnier, and also to please you as well. When I said goodbye that evening, we hugged goodbye, and she said, "My God, you've got a good body," which any of your viewers will see is not the case. But a little bit of you believes this, and she did that the whole time. She sent these fantastic thank you cards to the Oldie magazine whenever she wrote a brilliant article for us. I should have been writing the cards to her.
Harry, thank you so much for sharing your memories with us and for this wonderful story in the issue.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure to see you both.
in much more serious matters, Errol Morris is here to weigh in on a new book by Philip Taubman and William Taubman called McNamara at War, A New History. Morris is an Oscar-winning filmmaker and editor-at-large at Airmail, and of course also the genius behind the McNamara documentary that we couldn't stop talking about. Welcome, Errol.
Thank you for having me here.
So, Errol, your documentary on Robert McNamara really changed public perception of him. Why did you think that he would be such an interesting topic for a documentary in the first place? Take us back all those years ago now.
I can't even remember when I first heard about Robert McNamara, probably by reading the newspaper. It's a habit that I've had for many, many years. I continue to have this habit. I tell myself every morning I get 3 papers, hard copies of papers on paper, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Boston Globe. And every time I look at them, every morning that I look at them, I deeply regret having looked at them at all. And I think you can all imagine why. McNamara has been so closely identified with the war in Vietnam. For many years, it was known as McNamara's War, as if he was the person primarily responsible for it. At the University of Wisconsin and then later at Princeton, I demonstrated against the war, but this was in the late 60s, early 70s. McNamara was no longer part of the administration. He was no longer Secretary of Defense, or if you like the common parlance today, no longer Secretary of War. So he's someone who not just fascinated me, fascinated many, many, many people for years. And for many, many years, he was seen as someone truly evil, warmonger. And it came almost by accident. I had been doing a series called First Person. Now I guess it's become a very popular kind of thing, the essence of podcasts, if you like. I did a series called First Person, and I thought to myself, I'll do one show and one interview. I won't do a whole medley of interviews. I'll do one and only one person and create a show out of that. And I had filled my obligations. I'd done, I guess it was something like 12 of them, and I had some money left over, and I'd always really wanted to interview McNamara. I had read in retrospect, which was his chronicle of his experiences. And recently a book had come out called Wilson's Ghost, done by 2 Brown University scholars, James and Janet Blight. And Wilson's Ghost, even more than in retrospect, fascinated me. Why? Very simple reason. It had these italicized sections in it. And the italicized sections were based on first-person interviews with Robert McNamara. And I thought, these are great. These are just remarkable. And someone should do a first-person interview with this man. So I contacted him with the help of the Blights, and McNamara agreed to do the interview, much to my surprise. And then within a day, he called me back and said, I said I'd do it, but I've talked to a number of people about you, meaning me, and they told me it was a really bad idea. I shouldn't do the interview. It was a big, big mistake. And I was crestfallen, disappointed. He went on, it seemed interminably, explaining to me all of the reasons why talking to me would be a mistake for him. On and on and on and on. I felt, just say no. Forget it. And at the end of this diatribe, he said to me, but I said I'd do it, so I'll do it.
Errol, the fog of war really changed the way that the public saw McNamara. Did he ever thank you for that?
He liked the movie. That's a way of thanking me.
The 2 of you became friends after that, correct? I mean, he died in 2009, but there was a period of time in which it seems that you were quite close.
I don't know how close, but I like to think that he tolerated me, which was kind of a compliment because he didn't tolerate all that many people.
Well, in this story, in The View from Here this week, you said that you loved him. So it seems like it was more than mere affection.
I did love the guy. First, I loved talking to him. I learned a tremendous amount from him. Most people would think that he's a person lacking in candor. Maybe we're all lacking in candor in various degrees, but I learned so much that was unknown. I mean, why do I like doing interviews? I can't even really tell you why I like interviews, but here's one attempt, is that if you know what you're going to hear in an interview, don't do it. Don't bother. What's interesting about it is you don't know what you're going to hear. It's, to use a phrase from Shakespeare, which was applied in a somewhat different way, the undiscovered country. Although in this case, it's not about the dead, it's about the living. I'll give you an example. Out of nowhere, did I know this? Is it in retrospect? No. Is it in any of the published material at that time about Robert McNamara? No. The role that he played for the Army Air Force in Japan. Did I know that he was intimately involved with LeMay's firebombing of Tokyo? I did not. And I dare say most people did not. And yet here is McNamara talking about the night that they incinerated 100,000 people, 100,000 human beings, men, women, children in Tokyo. And I remember at the time, why is he telling me this? Because all of these stories are to a common purpose. I thought at one time, should he be telling me about Vietnam and the millions of people in Southeast Asia which were destroyed in that war? But I believe that story about Tokyo stands in for a lot of stories about war and destruction. He tells us you can find ways to justify behavior in war. I'm sure we're all familiar with the endless rationalizations about the use of atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the firebombing of Japanese cities that preceded the use of atomic weapons. Did it save lives? Was it justified? Is anything like this ever justified or justifiable? And I think these are deep, searching questions that haunted McNamara. And to me, he says this almost immortal line, maybe immortal line, that he and LeMay, if the war had been lost, would have been tried as war criminals. I have to say, maybe love is not the right word. It's still the word that I would choose, but he's someone I respected in the end. I think it's very difficult to understand anybody. And maybe human beings are hopeless ciphers that we can never completely understand. It's interesting that this book that just came out, McNamara's War, comes close to embracing a theory of McNamara that I myself like. The question changes slightly. If McNamara was against this war, really against it, why didn't he resign? Why did he remain as Secretary of Defense for so many years? And then a question that is asked endlessly is, after he was forced out, either fired or resigned, take your pick, by Johnson, why did it take him so many years to actually speak out against the war? The war raged on. I don't know how many people are familiar with this history, but Nixon ran on a peace platform. It's almost like a joke, and immediately escalated the war even further. It's a tangled, complicated story. I have my answers. I'm not sure that I'm completely secure with them, but I too have wrestled with these questions. And now I'll shut up.
Errol, in this new book, McNamara's War, what did you learn about the man that surprised you?
Well, there are all kinds of new material. They had access to all kinds of documents, correspondence, etc. Either was not available to me or I never saw. But it didn't really drastically alter my opinion of the man. He was a difficult customer. I later made a movie about Donald Rumsfeld. And did I come away loving Donald Rumsfeld? No. I came away actually not liking Donald Rumsfeld. A man, unlike McNamara, who wasn't wrestling with anything except finding a new self-justification. McNamara was a person very unhappy with himself. And as being no stranger to self-loathing myself, I identify with it.
Errol, you say in your story this week that McNamara rued to the end of his days his moral calculus, and that you never felt it came late in the game, that he must have carried it for a while. In listening to you, you demonstrated against the war when you were a student in the 60s, and then you make Fog of War and you get to know him. Are you able to forgive McNamara? And what can we learn from that? Because it seems that you were able to forgive him for what he did in that war serving Johnson.
I have a version of that unfortunate line about the Holocaust. What do they say? They say, the important thing is to forgive, but to never forget. I have my own version of that. The important thing is to never forgive. You can always forget, but who am I to forgive any of this? Who in hell am I? How do you forgive policies that led to the deaths of millions and millions of people? Not my job, and it would be actually ultimately presumptuous and pretentious to even suggest such a thing. No, we can forget about Vietnam. The important thing is never to forgive these policies, because there is no forgiving. The dead, correct me if I'm wrong, remain dead, and nothing brings them back to life. No element of forgiveness, no hand-wringing, no expressions of regret, none of it.
Well, Errol, thank you so much for sharing your insights and thoughts with us.
If you're a creative who finds inspiration in unexpected connections, who sees a design and immediately wonders about its origins, Claude gets that curiosity. Whether you're developing concepts, researching visual trends, or exploring how ideas move between industries, Claude helps you follow those creative rabbit holes that lead to breakthrough insights. Try Claude for free at claude.ai/morningmeeting and see why the world's best problem solvers choose Claude as their thinking partner.
All right, well, if you need an escape from the world, Elena Clavarino is here to take you very far away. Elena is a senior editor here at Airmail who's going to take us inside a hidden corner of Greece right down there on the boot. Welcome, Elena.
Hi, good morning, guys.
So, Elena, your story this week takes us to a pocket of Italy called Calabria. Where is this located and what do you find there?
So Calabria is on the toe of Italy's boot, and it's sort of been ignored by tourists over the last few decades because there's a major mafia presence there. It's actually little known, but basically it's the richest organized crime network in the world, has roots there. So to give you an idea, a 2023 study estimated its annual revenues to be around 72 billion, which is more than 3 times the combined income of all the Mexican cartels.
Elena, I thought that Italians were not supposed to talk about the mafia.
Well, I'm half English, so here I am.
So, Elena, you take us to the tiny little town of Galciano, population 60 people. You can't even get a phone signal there. What did you find?
Well, so I had kind of heard about this through a friend who is Greek. And basically, you find Italians in the mountains who still speak Greek. Well, a version of a kind of dialect of Greek called Grecanico, which is thought to date back almost 3,000 years. Because of the area's remoteness, they've retained the Greek from the ancient Greek people who once lived there.
Okay, so it's been a while since I've taken my, ancient history exams. So the Greeks were settlers in this region, or how did they end up there? What do we know about that?
They were settlers. They had colonies there in the 8th century before Christ until the Romans that arrived 600 years later.
That's amazing. So are there any other vestiges of Greek culture that are preserved in this town?
They basically have a Greek Orthodox church. They have an open theater. And they have, the main square is called Platia Alimos, which is Greek for Piazza Alimos or Alimos Square. They have a Greek trattoria. And yeah, they're very proud of their Greek roots.
But presumably they still have some sort of a mafia boss, right?
So they do. Well, they did. There was a mafia boss called Giuseppe Nucera who was arrested in 2018. It's hard to say in these Calabrian towns. It's a region with a major mafia presence. And the thing that's kind of distinctive about the 'Ndrangheta is that they're very low key. They live in modest houses. They're the kind of old men you maybe would see at the cafe playing cards in the afternoon. So that's kind of the characteristic of this mafia. They kind of are very, drive around in battered cars and are very low key.
Elena, if I understand, this dialect has never really been written down. It's just sort of like it's still passed on in an oral tradition.
Yeah, it was never studied in school. Some historians think that the reason is that the region was cut off from the rest of the country by very poor roads and kind of remained linguistically sealed, so to speak. even as, different conquerors came in, imposed new tongues. And yeah, it was passed down from mothers to daughters and lullabies and church chants. And yeah, local schools taught in Italian. So it survived in kitchens and fields kind of thing.
I'm just making a guess, or a theory. Is it possible that the mafia uses it to communicate as well?
I didn't see any evidence of that, but it's entirely possible.
I mean, Elena, this sounds to me like a region that is ripe for touristic development. I mean, let's just get Jared Kushner in here, right? Because it seems like this is a fairly hidden corner of Italy that is not exactly known to the outside world. I mean, you've got everyone and their mother going to the Amalfi Coast. What do you think? Should we be getting in on this business?
Well, it's extremely beautiful, and you have these mountain ranges. You can ski there in the winter in Calabria, which are very, very close. Like maybe they're a 20-minute drive from the Rainbow Coast with turquoise water. The issue is, I don't know if the mafia would, if you're a big tourist developer, if you'd run into any issues there. I think as a tourist, there's no need to worry. And perhaps they aren't interested in child's play like resorts. I have no idea.
Okay, good to know. Well, look, worst case scenario, Michael, we can add this to the list for next year. Just pop on in. Say we read about it in airmail. Elena, you'll have to go into hiding. It's perfect.
You should definitely visit. We found a beautiful agriturismo right next door to the town. It was an incredible trip.
For people who do want to get there, what is your route to getting there? If you're coming from Rome or Milan, how did you get down there?
If you're me and Michael and you're coming from the Principe di Savoia or the Hotel de Russie, like what's your track?
Well, I drove down actually from Milan, which takes around 11 hours, but you can stop in wonderful places along the way. Tuscany, and then we stopped in Rome, and then we stopped in Naples, and then south of Naples, a few hours away, there's a beautiful old monastery. It's like one of the biggest Baden monasteries, I think, in Europe, and it's in the middle of this random town near Naples called Padula. Again, like just an example of how many beautiful things there are to see around Italy that nobody knows about.
Okay, let me run this by you. 2 nights at the Russie, take the train down to Naples, 1 night there. I forgot the name of that big hotel on the seaside. We stay there, we buy some suits, eat pizza. 2 nights in Ischia, Michael, at the Mezzatorre. Then we head on down there, Elena, by rental car. What do you think?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
it
done.
Sounds like an ideal plan.
Okay, Michael, next August, sorted.
Okay, airmail retreat.
Elena, thank you again, as always, for taking us inside these hidden corners of I think we can now say Italy's our favorite country, Michael.
It's definitely my favorite country, guys.
All right. Well, if you say so, Elena, we're right there with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
There's only one place to discover a global snapshot of the current cultural scene. Airmail's Arts Intel Report. Our international research tool for what to do and where and when to do it is user-friendly, continuously updated, and meticulously curated. Arts Intel is handy at home, on the road, and when you're planning your next trip. It also includes indispensable lists of restaurants and hotels in key cities around the world, recommended by our well-traveled experts. Explore Arts Intel at airmail.news/arts-intel, and be sure to sign up for our Week in Culture newsletter, which is published every Wednesday afternoon at airmail.news/WIC. I'm Chris Garrett, an Airmail Deputy Editor, and I never leave home without it. Bon voyage.
Michael, I have tackled basically our entire to-do list for next year. Like, we already know we're going on holiday. We've got tons of new books to read. And you are going to get schooled on Jilly Cooper. It's perfect.
Sounds like perfect beach reading down there, too.
We've got life planned out. But in the meantime, I know it is the weekend, and surely you've got something you can recommend to us.
Well, there was a report out this week that we're about to get a sequel to one of the great movies, which came out 30 years ago this fall. That one was called Heat. I hope you're familiar with it, because if you're not, you should watch it or rewatch it, as I recently have. This is the Michael Mann masterpiece that's set in L.A. and stars Robert De Niro as a master criminal planning a major heist, and Al Pacino plays the cop tasked with bringing him down. It was the first time these two titans appeared in a movie in the same scenes. You've also got a cast with Val Kilmer, Jon Voight, and even a young Natalie Portman. It's widely seen as a classic of the genre and kind of most notable not only for that scene of those two guys together, but also for an insane shootout that happens in real time. As I said, word got out this week that Leonardo DiCaprio is circling the sequel. We'll see where that lands. But in the meantime, why not stream Heat on Amazon Prime? And you, my dear, what do you have for us?
I mean, I'm just living for each new episode of Slow Horses.
Yeah, I'm fully just chomping at the bit, no pun intended, every week waiting for it.
Okay, Michael, I think I already know the answer to this, but do you have a view on the life of a showgirl?
I don't. I haven't listened to a minute of it. I've read the coverage of the lyrics. All I'll say is, maybe coming off of Jilly Cooper, who might appreciate this, I'll just say the word sequoia, and then you can go from there. But that's all I'm going to say, okay? What do I need to know? You can tell us all about it.
I mean, there's so many cringe lyrics in this, but I will say, I don't even think it's a very good album. And as you know, I am a Taylor Swift fan. But I can't stop singing these stupid songs. I'm waking up in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning with that Elizabeth Taylor song going through my head. It's just maddening. It's it's even more addictive than Doritos. It's like a ultra processed pop music.
That's a good way to put it. But see, it's just it's sugar and it's fat and it's just keeps you coming back for more. But maybe it's all empty calories.
Oh, well, I do have one sort of cultural thing to recommend to you.
Ooh, now we get to high culture, please.
Okay, so there's a great exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum here in London about the style of Marie Antoinette, which, this is my kind of museum exhibition, right? It's basically lots of fashion and there's tons of great shoes.
Is this where we say don't lose your head over it?
LOL. It's on through March 22nd of 2026. And I have to say, I found it so completely compelling. I came home and of course, what I had to do was rewatch the Sofia Coppola film. And then, Michael, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I actually went to the Manolo Blahnik store and bought the boots from the Marie Antoinette collection. So now I'm walking around in these ridiculous 18th century black taffeta boots. I mean, it's completely absurd. My husband was like, is that part of your Halloween costume? I was like, no, these basically cost more than my first car. Anyway, it's incredibly embarrassing, but there you have it. So I'll wear them when I see you in New York in a couple weeks. Then you can judge me for them there.
It'll be Halloween here too.
I know, I'm all ready. All I need is a hat. We're good to go. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us. That's a wrap on today's morning meeting brought to you by Claude. If you're someone who can't help but ask, where did this idea really come from? Or what if we trace this influence back further? Try Claude. It's the AI that feeds your curiosity rather than rushing you to conclusions. Try Claude for free at claude.ai/morning meeting. Michael, will you please read us out?
Absolutely. Morning Meeting is produced by Airplay Productions and edited by Jesse Cannon. Our co-editors are Graydon Carter and Alexander Stanley. Our chief operating officer is Bill Keenan. And our deputy editors are Ashley Baker, Chris Garrett, Nathan King, Julie Vitale, and Ash Carter. Our CMO is Emily Davis. And our music supervisor is Randall Post. Our theme music is The Cute Monster by the Buddy Collette Quintet. A new edition of Airmail is published every Saturday, so please subscribe and enjoy all of our stories on airmail.news, which we update every day. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Airmail Weekly. We will be back here next Saturday with another edition of Morning Meeting, but in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to Spotify or Apple Music. But most of all, thanks again for joining us.